Justified Season 6, Episode 5, Sounding. Now, this is definitely an interesting episode with Ava deciding she's too freaked out to continue with, kind of keeping this ruse going with, her lying to Boyd and freaking out whether or not he's going to find something out. Her wondering whether or not this woman thinks that she's an informant or knows that she's an informant and working, with the sheriffs. And Ava takes off, and Raylan has to find her. She ditches her phone. He has to call in some help, and it was definitely a cool episode, and we got to see some pretty fun points. Not just her storyline. If anything, as interesting as her storyline was, in the fact that she was led down that path because she was freaking out about being captured, I actually thought that was the least entertaining portion of kind of the three big stories that we had. It had some great moments because we got to see two old characters that came back who always seem to have little moments in the seasons now. Like, they had their moment where they were a part of, like, being the big villains, and now they kind of just, they're really, like, the only characters that were ever villains outside of Boyd who were really big villains, and then, now they're just kind of, in the series. And I guess some of the other characters too, but they were the only ones who had, like, a big organization or anything like that. And they're still doing their thing, and it's, kind of worked out well for them. But her story, as cool as it was, and it had a great moment, like when when Ava and Raylan were yelling at each other, or mostly Raylan was yelling. I thought that was kind of funny, and then of course them actually kissing at the end of the episode was very surprising to me, because I honestly never would have expected them to get back together in any way. I thought he had his moment. I really thought that he was kind of committed to the relationship he was in, if he's in one, because honestly, it's really hard to judge with the two of them sometimes. And, like, I know he wants to be with the baby, but I guess technically that doesn't mean that he wants to be with his ex-wife. I can't even remember what they are, honestly, because it's just so much back and forth with them. But I was very surprised by them actually kissing in the end of this episode. That was probably the most entertaining thing because it was just so shocking. Because I knew, of course, that Raylan would end up getting her back somehow, and he'd either convince her to get back or he'd kind of just take her back like he did in this episode. And so I wasn't too shocked by anything that, kind of happened as far as her leaving and then going back by the end. But the kiss was definitely something that caught me off guard. So I don't know if that's going to really play a big role as far as her being CE and Raylan trying to keep his emotions out of it and not changing how much he wants to protect her and trying to go a little overboard because he's getting those feelings back that he used to have in previous seasons or anything like that. But, we'll just have to wait and see. The other two storylines were definitely entertaining, though. And one kind of blends in with Ava's storyline and them actually going to the cop. And I was very curious to see how that was going to play out and what the cops ended up doing. Fortunately, we have, like, our three main people is, like, Raylan and then the other two whose names I can never remember. But fortunately, both of them are always pretty cool. So they, saw the guy was watching the house. And then they set up the whole deal, like, all right, come to this hotel or come to this motel. We'll say you just say you're doing this, and we'll watch you from inside the room. And I thought that was a cool scene. I thought that was pretty fun. Getting to see when get the cattle prod. It was like, I normally use tasers, but those get tracked and stuff. And this, doesn't, and it's even more powerful, and it doesn't get tracked. I thought that was an interesting step for him. Them playing Scrabble was hilarious to me with the aplexed and all that stuff, which I thought was really funny. I don't know if it was he meant to say perplexed or what, but I thought that was really funny. And I was looking it up, and there were a bunch of tweets for when this episode initially came out, people saying, like, I'm going to use aplexed all the time now and stuff like that. It was aplexing and stuff. I thought that was just a really funny scene. It was like, I don't think that's a word. It was like, well, it's a word. He aplexed me. And it was just a nice, funny little scene with those characters, with Win and Mikey, and I thought that was pretty cool. So just a little moment with them, which we don't really have too often, where it's just the two of them talking, because Win's important, but Mikey is, like, a fairly minimal character. Like, I think he had a really big scene last season when he was fighting, like, the big crow who was played by Michael Rappaport. I don't remember the character's name. And they were, like, fighting each other, and Michael was doing, like, martial arts and stuff, and he came and he, like, was body slamming them and stuff. And I thought that was a cool moment for Mikey, because he doesn't really get any big scenes, because he's just, like, Win's, bodyguard, really. But it was a cool little moment, and them going to see the cop and stuff, and attacking him, basically, and him kind of holding steady on the lies that he was doing to protect Ava, because that's what they needed him to do. So I enjoyed that. I thought it was cool. It was a nice way for Ava to be safe as far as her being suspected as an informant. And then of course we had the stuff with Boyd and him going to Ava's uncle and getting him to be like this new guy to help them dig through these old tunnels and stuff. And he wasn't much help as far as keeping the other guy safe, because he knew the stuff about the methane and everything. And I feel like there had to be some other way. I guess there wasn't. I mean, all they had was just like the big saw, so there really wasn't anything else they could do. And he just yells, like he sees the methane kind of seeping out. He's like, get the hell off of there. And the one guy gets blown away. I'm like, I don't know if he'll ever hear it again. I have to assume he will for the show, but I don't know in real life. Honestly, I don't know in real life if he even would have lived. I know it's like a giant manhole, so I wouldn't have expected it to blow apart anyway. So I think that was fairly realistic, because those things are just insane, especially since it was built to cover up a mine, and it's not just like a street manhole cover. Those are heavy enough. I can only imagine how heavy a mine manhole cover would be. So that like blowing off, I actually think is fairly realistic. It wouldn't blow into pieces, but I don't know if that guy would have made it in real life. Like he flew back really far. I know he kind of landed in water, so it's like like an inch or whatever of water, so it was slightly soft for him. But man, I don't know if he would have made it in real life, and if he did, I don't think he'd be hearing for a very long time, if at all. But that was an interesting scene too. That gym just blew off, and he just flew back, and it was crazy. So they have to let that sit for, I think the guy said like 12 hours or something crazy, or he could have just said a couple hours, but they have to let that sit. Of course, I'm sure it'll all be done, TV style. It's like, all right, boom, we can get into it now. So I'm sure we'll get that in the next episode. But it was cool to see them bring in someone new that actually knew what they were doing. They have to, they kind of still have to figure out exactly what they're going to do as far as the safe goes. But I'm sure they were able to figure some of that stuff out. And so now they have a new guy to help them get through the tunnels and figure out all the extra stuff with the methane and all that stuff, which I'd never heard before. The wet damp and black damp, all that stuff, which I thought was crazy. Like what he mentioned about oxygen being taken out of your lungs, and it feels like you're drowning, but there's obviously no water. That sounds very interesting. I've never heard of that before, so it kind of it's one of those things where it's like you hear it on a TV show, and you just kind of want to look it up. Like, I've never heard of that, and it sounds sort of cool, but at the same time, the only way people would know that, unfortunately, is if they experienced it. So can't say cool, but it's definitely interesting. Just like the Aplex stuff, which I figured wasn't a word at all, because it doesn't sound like it. I've never heard it, but that doesn't really mean anything. And I haven't. It's not a real word. I had to look it up, because it was like, is it a real word that I just don't know? I've never heard before, and it's definitely not, as far as I know. I couldn't find anything online, so kind of speaks to it not actually being a word. But it was definitely funny, and this was definitely a great episode. I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see the next couple of steps that Boyd has to take, and definitely the next couple of steps we see from like Boyd's people, and even the other side of things with Markham and his people, or Avery. I should just go with Avery because it's easier to say. But Avery and his people, we kind of saw them trying to figure things out, like, how do these people know exactly what's going on? And it's, of course, because Calhoun, who has unfortunately been punched once and died now in this episode, he was the one who, of course, told Raylan, and then that kind of spread from there. And when they had the scene, and this is one of the things I always loved about Justified, they have these villains who always seem to have these skills. There's always people who are just like, just oddly deadly. They're either, just military personnel, formerly military personnel, or they're just incredibly strong people, or they're like really smart in like that very evil sort of way like Boyd is, or a lot of the other people we've seen. And it's always really fun to watch these people kind of deal with some of the lesser characters, where we know this person unfortunately is expendable, and they could easily be put in harm's way by some of the villains. And that's what happened with Calhoun. And the guy's telling them the story about someone he tortured before, and hitting him in the place. I can't remember exactly what to call it, a perennial strike or something like that, and just hitting him over and over. And it was just interesting hearing him and stuff. And when like the one time Calhoun was trying to speak, he just was like shh and just kind of shut him down. And it was just a cool little scene. Like it was one of those tense scenes where he's, whenever someone does that, they're explaining it because you're about to get hurt. So it was just one of those scenes where the tension was kind of building up for this character who obviously isn't going to be able to withstand a lot of pain. And unfortunately, he gets punched one time and he's killed off the show. And I don't know how that's going to work out because I don't know if they're going to take the body, and if they do, it may or may not come back to bite him. I think Raylan won't have any real reason to go back because he kind of got the info that he needed. So odds are he won't do that because he got all the information when he was there the first time, writing the names down and stuff. At least I have to assume he did. We didn't see that, but I would have to assume they kind of got some of this information, and they probably already know as far as based on what's supposed to be happening. I'm sure they can guess which houses, even if they don't have the exact names and things like that. But that killing off someone, it has to come back at some point. Like this person's missing. Obviously, someone who not only owns this business, but he meets with a hooker like every week. So she'll probably end up going to Raylan and giving him this info, like, hey, he didn't suddenly just stop, purchasing this hooker for every single week. Something's up. So I'm pretty sure that's how that's going to end up playing out. And we still haven't seen anything happen as far as the Dewey stuff come up with Dewey Crow having been killed off in the premiere. But I feel like that has to come up at some point. Like, it's an important character. It may or may not be how they actually get Boyd with the whole necklace thing and stuff like that. Just simple, that random little bit of evidence. But I feel like that has to come up at some point because he is a big character who was in the city and now he's missing. They're obviously doing like some really big stuff right now, so it's not a giant focus, but I feel like it's going to have to come back at some point. And then this might kind of lead into it with Calhoun being the first guy who goes missing, and then it kind of leads into like, well, where's this person who we always end up running into every couple of weeks or so because he did something stupid or illegal again. So still excited. I think all the episodes have been great. I'm really enjoying this last season. I always love all the seasons. I don't think there's ever really been a season where I didn't enjoy it or an episode wasn't like really cool in some way. So it's just been as good as it's always been. I'm definitely excited for it. It obviously sucks that the series is ending, but it's been a really fun last season. I'm liking the villains. I'm liking everything that's happening with Boyd and Raylan trying to deal with all this extra stuff, because I thought it really was just going to be him going after Boyd. I didn't think there would actually be sort of another kind of mid-villain that they were going up against, but it ended up being that way, and I'm glad it's like that, because it just adds more characters that Raylan has to go up against and who have these crazy cool scenes where they're about to like attack someone, and we get silly characters like Choo Choo, and then we get like the serious characters like pretty much everyone else around him. So I'm enjoying it. The skim milk thing I thought was a really good line in this episode too. I thought that was very funny. And he's just like, how about some skim milk? You got skim milk. I thought that was just really good writing too. But I want to know what you guys thought about this episode. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And with everything that happened in this episode, obviously the Ava stuff, kind of both portions of that story kind of work themselves out. But Boyd still has to figure out exactly what's going to happen. He has one person like himself who really knows everything. We've got like a third guy who knew what like the wet damp and dark damp stuff is, but he didn't know the exact chemicals. So that when it's involving chemicals, that's a big deal. You can't get names wrong because you'll either explode or something crazy. So it's like you got two people that know what they're doing. One guy who knows names and kind of knows chemicals, and then two people who don't know anything about it. And that's incredibly dangerous for him, like for what they're doing with, I believe they talked about it was like 40 years since it was last used or like kept up. So they've got like, I think 183 yards or something they mentioned to go across or go under, and it's going to be pretty crazy. So I want to know what you guys think is going to happen with Boyd and like what complications he's going to come across. Is he going to have to find someone new like once again, or is he going to have to deal with his people just dying and having to, move on because they're getting killed off in this tunnel or something. Because he's got a lot of crap to deal with, and he doesn't really have anyone to help him out that really knows what they're doing. It's like two people, and he's one of them. So yeah, there are going to be a lot of issues that he has to deal with. But like I said, I want to know what you guys thought, so please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.